Today I'm going to show you how I set up my palette so that I can keep it for many weeks. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you a palette that I've been using. Um, I've added some paints to it and continued to work with it, but I've been using it for over 8 weeks. So I think one of the most frustrating things that acrylic artists run up against is that their paints dry so fast. And so you're not able to keep them on the palette easy. You're not able to come back and work on it later after you're interrupted by a crazy puppy. So hopefully the steps that I've learned will help you, and you'll be able to adjust things as it works best for you. So let me go ahead and add it in my palette here so that you can see what I'm working on. So here I have just a clean, empty palette. And when I come down to set up a brand new palette, these are the steps that I would take. First of all, this is a 12 by 16, I think, glass palette. This one is from Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby has some great prices. You can find glass palettes in lots of different sizes at different places, but this 12 by 16, if you're wondering what size to get, I would say get the biggest one that you think you can work with. It's nice to have the extra space. So I also have my favorite palette knife. I love the Liquitex Freestyle. I love how much it bends and how easy I'm able to scrape with it. So I'm just going to put on this palette some titanium white, just to kind of show you guys a step-by-step of how I would set up each color. When I'm setting up my palette, I don't always set out the same colors, but I do like to organize them in relatively the same way. So oftentimes you'll see my yellow paints over here, reds, blues, burnt umbers, browns. If I put out black, it will be generally on this side, and then any whites or off-whites that I would use would be here. So if you're just starting out, it is nice to have a basic general layout of how you're going to set up your palette. I'm just going to pull out a little bit of the titanium white. I'm going to put it down here toward the bottom. I like to mix it in one area and then set it where I'm going to have it live on my palette. And then I'm going to add some slow dry medium or open medium. My favorite is the Dare Van Matisse. It has been a little bit harder to find recently. So if you can't find that, I have linked in this description also the Winsor & Newton slow dry medium. Go for something that's a gel or has some body to it. I don't think that for this you would want to use kind of a fluid extender because we kind of want it to stay where we put it on the palette. So I'm just going to open up my open medium, and I'm going to pick up a bit with my palette knife and mix that in. As you guys are setting up your palette, you'll be able to experiment with this a little bit and decide how much medium you want to add. If you're painting and you're finding that your paints, each of your layers are drying too slowly, then add a little bit less of the open medium. I probably go for about 25% or 1 part open medium to 4 parts paint. That's generally what I'm aiming for, but I'm not measuring it at all, just kind of eyeing it. So then I'll just mix that open medium into the paint. Make sure that it's all incorporated. And then I scrape it up with my palette knife and move it to where I want it on my palette. Any of these little mixing areas, they can dry faster than the bulk of paint will here. So it's nice just to mix in one area, clean up that spot, and move it to where you want it to be. So like I said, I would do that. I do that step with each color that I put on my palette. If I'm painting and I run out of a color, I would do that again, put out the new color I need, add some of the open medium, and place it onto my palette. So once you're finished painting for the day and you want to put your palette away, um, I love these serving trays. And again, I have a link in the video description. Hopefully those links become clickable for you at some point, but for now, I've just listed them there, so hopefully it makes it easier for you to find it. So it's a 12 by 16 glass palette. This is a 12 by 16 plastic like serving tray. I use it to put on top of my palette just to keep the paint from sticking to the Ziploc bag that I'm going to put all of this in. And so before I seal it up, what I like to do, and I'm going to try to do this in a way that the camera doesn't blur out for you. I like to just take a fine mist sprayer and I spray the very top of this tray, or what will become the bottom when I flip it over onto my palette. So this just adds a little bit of moisture without adding a lot of moisture to my paint itself. So then I turn that over, place it on top of the glass palette. And then for this size, for the 12 by 16, this is a 3-gallon Ziploc. So I would just open the Ziploc, slide both of those in, seal it up nice and tight. And then when I'm ready to come back down and paint, it is all set to go. And it's so nice to be able to come down, not have to go through all of those prep steps. I can just pull out my palette and get started right away painting. So let me go ahead and pull over the palette that I was talking about before. This is the palette that I've been working on for a number of weeks. The last piece that I was working on was the Midnight Crow. So you can see some of the paint mixes here. Some of these very thin areas where I've mixed paint, those are dry. Again, because of what I talked about before, any of these thin areas will dry out faster. But all of the other paints are still wonderfully wet and ready to paint with. So any area like this that had dried up, I have a couple of choices. I can leave that color there. And the nice thing about that is that if I want to mix more of it, I can still see that color on my palette. Or I can just take my palette knife, scrape up and clean that area. You can also use your fine mist sprayer to add a little bit of water to the area and then wipe it up. If you're using a glass palette like this, I'm just going to see if I could reach it here real quick for you. The other thing that I like to use when cleaning up my palette is just a straight edge blade. You can see that this one is well loved. I use it a lot. So again, I can come in and just scrape up those areas that are dry. And you can see how nicely that cleans the palette for me. So I will say that, like I mentioned before, if you're just starting out using open medium, experiment with what works best for you, and what you want your drawing times to be. The more you add open medium or add, spritz it with water, the longer that the paints stay out here, the more they can become very transparent because you've added the open mediums and the water to them so many times. So if that happens, scrape that color out, put some new color out, and you're all set to go. But it sure is handy. It probably takes to set up a palette and get ready to paint. I bet it takes 30 minutes, open up all the colors. So this is a real time saver for me, and I hope that you all will find it to be helpful for you. Like I said, I've tried some different things. I've tried the wet palette. I didn't like it. I found that my paints got too watery. I've also tried using the little plastic condiment cups and sealing them that way. I also didn't like that. I found that the paint sort of dried around the edge of the cup, and I was always fighting with those little crumbly mostly dry paint areas. So I'm going to add myself back in. So I hope that that helps you. If you have any questions about this, please write them in the comments. I'm happy to help any way that I can. Um, I think that if you're one of those painters that is struggling with acrylic paints, just drying too fast, or struggling with the mixes that you have on your palette drying too fast, I think that this will be good for you. I will say in closing that if you find that this technique works really well for you, it might be worth investing later in another another 12 by 16 palette, or whatever size you chose, and another one of the plastic covers. Because what I like to do is, once my palette gets messy and I just feel like I'm struggling with it being such a mess, I can move any good paint from the messed up palette to my new clean palette, clean the old messed up palette, and sort of reset and start again. Sometimes if you paint like me, your palette can get to be kind of a mess. So later, if you find out that you like this technique, it might be good to invest in another one just so you can switch out. So I hope that you will subscribe to the channel here. We have lots of videos that are going to be coming on our Patreon page. So for just $9.95 a month, you can join our Patreon and see the full lessons. So I have lots more of those coming, and also lots more tips on acrylic painting. So I hope you'll subscribe and come in and hang out when we have videos.